We're back with more NBA coverage, and in this one, we started off with a pair of trades that are, for all intents and purposes, confusing. They really show that between the opinions of the public eye and the fan base out there, especially of these two players in particular, and the viewpoints of what the front office perceives as well, the way we look at the value in certain players can be sometimes overblown, and they don't even remotely match up. And I think that when you look at the two centerpieces involved in these trades specifically, you put them side by side, without context, without any understanding of their off-the-court issues, because they've both had them noted, and they've been well documented over the past few years. In fact, some of this stuff was happening around the same time, so we have to establish that point. But on the court, at least, you would imagine that one would have far more value than the other if you didn't have any other knowledge of what has been happening with these particular players over the past few years. And we get to this stage where this team in Charlotte, for pretty much the second time in the last week, has now swung a deal to invest more into their future and establish the notion that while this core of theirs, as it was in the 2025 season, might have been exciting, it did not take them to anywhere close to contention whatsoever. They had their lone season of, I guess, high-level production overall, one of the better seasons they've had in the last decade. And right when they got to that point, they pounced on the opportunity to start breaking this up, focusing more on their younger assets, and just getting stuff done. It's crazy. So with that, this is where we start. Where earlier in the league, and all this stuff, most of this stuff is coming from Shams Charania as well. You know, we are nearing that time of the free agency period, and he has been on this already. But the Hornets would trade Miles Bridges, a 2029 first-round pick, and a 2027 second-round pick, to Phoenix in exchange for Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neale, and a 2033 first-round pick. It's been a few days since this trade actually took place, and this shit is still confusing to me. Still. Because we'd already established previously that Miles Bridges, again, had a pretty solid year last year, and has taken a bit of a jump as a player who is right in the middle of his prime, technically speaking, at the age of 28. So it's not like the Suns are getting back a terrible player. In fact, by moving on from Royce O'Neale and, picking up Miles Bridges, you are getting a starting caliber player. Admittedly, right now, the rest of their lineup has not proven as much as you would expect. Like, they did occasionally give O'Neale starting level minutes when he was with the team, but you weren't relying on that all the time. And you were hoping that some of these other people could take a jump. They're not even remotely close to that. Everyone else backing up Miles Bridges right now, which I can expand upon further, they are all young, they are all unproven, and they have yet to take the leap as a serviceable, even, player on the team, aside from a few core traits that a couple of them may possess, namely Ryan Dunn, for example, who is really there for his defense right now. That was his specialty coming out of the draft. And he has not really expanded his game all that much. They needed some form of a scoring punch at that power forward position. And from that perspective, you win. You instantly bring in Miles Bridges, a guy who gave you a cool 17 per game last year on pretty good efficiency. He's a hell of a lob threat, obviously a dynamic athlete at that position. So being able to run that offense and have that vertical threat in the half court in transition could be beneficial to a Suns team that did at times seem to struggle with their pacing. Like that is going to help a ton. There's no denying that whatsoever. Now, it makes things interesting because with this lineup as constructed, you have Bridges next to Brooks, Green, Booker, and Williams. Now, obviously, he and Williams were teammates before, so there's some existing chemistry there already. And of course, the fact that Matt Ishbia, which I actually, ended up finding this out while watching a microphone video on this. This brother in January was apparently raving about Miles Bridges and his on-court talent. In January. So, I guess this is something that was in the plan for Matt Ishbia and this ownership group, this team, this front office for a few months now. As interesting as that sounds to say, for Miles Bridges of all people. Oh yeah, and the obvious, he's a Michigan Stater. Yeah, because Matt Ishbia is too. A lot of the Suns front office people are alum of Michigan State. It's ridiculous at this point. Sparty can't be that good to you. You respect Tom Izzo and all that. It can't be to that fucking level. Like, there's got to be some form of just very suspicious activity going on with that. But I digress. In all seriousness, though, here comes the really confusing part for this in several ways. Because another bonus for them, I guess, I'll be fair. Another bonus for them is that, yes, you lose Grayson Allen, who is a pretty solid three-point shooter in his own right, although his efficiency kind of dipped last year. And you also move on from a very great and possibly the only true 3-and-D player in Royce O'Neale on that team, if that makes any sense. Especially at the wing position before Miles Bridges got there. Because really, like with some of the guys they already had, like Grayson Allen could give you 3-point shooting, Colin Gillespie could give you 3-point shooting, Jordan Goodwin could give you defense. They were not exceptionally great at both of those assets. And O'Neale was pretty good at both. And that is definitely a tough quality to lose. But at the same time, keeping Goodwin's defense for a short-term contract, keeping Colin Gillespie on a short-term contract, who also saw a rise in production and three-point efficiency last season as well at the same time, it made it a little easier for the Suns, I guess, to look at those two and say that, hey, we can move on from them, especially with O'Neale being far older. Grayson Allen compared to Colin Gillespie, not so much. But O'Neale specifically, you move on from that. He is, I think 34 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So, you get a little younger at that position. You get some starting caliber offense at the very least from Miles Bridges, and you continue to live to tell the story. Yeah, so O'Neale's 33. 5 years is not seemingly that much of a difference, but it's everything in NBA years. So they get a little younger with the deal, and they get a solid asset in return. It's just that Miles Bridges' role isn't really going to change. And I think that's something that a lot of people haven't necessarily said. I'll get to that specific point in a bit. But, yeah, Bridges being with this team now, you look at all those other three guys, and you understand just how much they need their touches. Also, considering, Dillon Brooks' season last year and how circumstantial it had to be because of Jalen Green's injury, there is a true possibility that even with Miles Bridges being a starting player, he will likely end up being the third, maybe fourth option on his own team. Now, granted, Miles Bridges is not that caliber of player to have the expectation to adjust to a far greater role than that. But I mean, at the same time, you're going to potentially get less touches than Brooks, of all people. And then Jalen Green and Devin Booker are obviously going to have to settle into those roles. Booker's obviously the franchise star, and Jalen Green, at the very least, when he is on his A game, he can be a solid volume scorer. It's just that he is not consistent enough. But they have still run this offense under Jordan Ott, where, even if you're not expecting these players to be the primary ball handlers and primary scoring options on an offense, those guys have now asserted themselves into that. And I'm sure that he'll find creative ways to get Bridges involved in this new offense that he'll be learning with him. But at the same time, you're going to put more trust in the guys that have already been there for a year, or at least majority of the year, and who have at least some mastery of the offense, unless Ott chooses to shift it. I don't know what that would do for Miles Bridges' psyche. I mean, at the very least, the Hornets were in a position where, you have Ball, you have Diabate, you have Neupel, you have Miller, and on nights there, it's he could be the fourth option. I just get the feeling that it will not be as dynamic. There were games last season where, again, I'm out here saying, if Miles Bridges is leading you in scoring, you have an absolute problem on your hands, and yet those kinds of nights for Miles Bridges were popping up more and more, and it led to a few Hornets wins throughout the season. That team had enough flexibility on it to work that out, to have multiple players on any given night fit into that primary threat role seamlessly and without missing much of a beat. The Suns, on their own volition, may not be able to afford the same thing. So that's one of the main things that jump out to me about this trade when it comes to a con for this team. And then also, not to mention, because we'll definitely talk about this and we'll make that a transition into the next trade, fittingly enough. In what universe is Miles Bridges worth a first-round pick? And Suns have already fucked themselves over throughout this entire decade. With multi-team trades, the Miles Bridges one, to have him move on from Brooklyn and then in the process lose the rights to one of their draft picks. The notion and the trade that sent him to Brooklyn in the first place, of course. The Kevin Durant deal tied into the same thing. Resetting their future at a moment's notice. And then who can forget the fucking mammoth of a Bradley Beal contract? Now you're telling me that Miles Bridges, in some universe similar to this, is worth a first-round pick in 2033. What the fuck are they thinking about? We're just trying shit at this point. We're just trying shit. Miles Bridges could not possibly be that much of a needle mover for you to mortgage your entire future behind it. And that's where a lot of, the other people that are criticizing this trade fall, at least for the Suns. Because it's 2033. You already lost the 2031 pick that everybody was bringing up. Everybody was talking about that pick a few years back. You already lost the rights to that. you're still going to go even further out for the rights to a player who could, in that same time span, legitimately be the fourth most important player on your team. As a starter, the fourth scoring option on your team, as an individual player, and a guy who apparently might not even stick around for the long haul as it is. At the very least, with guys like O'Neale and also Allen, you have a model for veteran leadership in O'Neale and consistent production in his role with Grayson Allen. Bridges can be a volatile player at times. Like, again, the same player who will have nights like that will also go on at times to completely shoot a team out of a ball game if you give him the ball too much. He will not offer you much of anything on the defensive end as well, so they get much weaker there. Even if some of the other guys that are unproven, ironically enough, have defense as a stronger trait, like the aforementioned Ryan Dunn. They drafted Rasheer Fleming. They have Amir Coffey. They have Jordan Goodwin. Like, they have Oso Ighodaro. Like, none of these guys have come along as offensive weapons just yet. They are all backing up Miles Bridges in some fashion, and yet they are still going to have to play while giving you zero value, especially Ryan Dunn and Rasheer Fleming as shooters, because they simply can't. Fleming just got here. Ryan Dunn's in his third year. Maybe it can improve. He saw a slight uptick, but he's genuinely not efficient from there, and teams will still dare him to shoot time after time after time again. How do you put all of that on the same court together? It's just going to be a hard ask to do it. Genuinely. It's just very hard for me to be sold on the idea of you sending that away for him. At the very least in the deal, you can argue, okay, even with me complaining about that, they did get a first round pick back sooner. But all this just seems to be out of impulse, I guess, for the Suns. Because they've already dug themselves into a hole. If they believe that Miles Bridges is truly the needle mover for this roster to usher them all the way into contention for a NBA championship, it's because of the failures that they've had over the past few years from Matt Ishbia, sinking this team into a deep submission. It is as a byproduct of that, and pretty much nothing else. Now you're trying to do the same thing again with this deal, and I just don't know how many people you're going to sell on that. No matter about the Michigan State connection or how good of a player you may really believe Miles Bridges is. Like, 2029 is much closer, and again, they'll have the rights to it. But if they expect to be any good, that's not going to hold value. And, the Hornets could be anywhere in the next few years. You send out a pick 7 years away just to get access to them? Like, is that what we're really about here? Not sure. Now, we'll move on to the Hornets and address their side of things as well, because, again, they are getting a great deal here. Yes, they send away their 2029 first and their 2027 second rounder, but they already have a pretty good amount of draft capital as it is from some of the previous trades they have done to this point. And the fact that they got picks from the Timberwolves already. They didn't need to stockpile too much. At the very least, the fact that they were able to get Miles Bridges off their team for something is a flat-out miracle. We're not even taking into consideration the fact that this man was literally suspended for 30 games and also missed the entire season leading up to what would be a 10-game suspension with 20 served because of the fact that he put hands on his fucking girlfriend at the time. Off the court. That's what happened to Miles Bridges in 2023. Or rather, not what happened to him, it's what he did. That is a fact. That is not alleged. This happened. That was well documented. And he paid a hefty price for it, at least on the court. And in the terms of the law, maybe not so. Aside from, I think, a restraining order. But, whatever you want to do with that, like it is what it is now, that is the kind of stuff that Bridges was involved with in terms of the off-the-court issues. And, to this point, he hasn't, to our knowledge, gotten into anything like that again. But who's to say that it's just going to be perfectly streamlined? And to say that he will not come across something like that again, it's hard to gauge right now. And that is something that is going to have to loom over the Suns' head as well in the back of their mind, thinking that at any moment we could legitimately lose Miles Bridges for the dumbest reason imaginable off the court. The way the Hornets are trying to carry themselves now, they want to focus on the future without having all of these thoughts about the ways in which their assets can self-sabotage their careers. And by moving on from Miles Bridges, you don't have to deal with any of that drama right now, at least in the moment. You get to focus strictly on basketball. And that, in and of itself, is an automatic win from a PR standpoint, from this Hornets team. At the same time, getting back guys like Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neale, again, they can both produce at an elite level. And Allen as well, although I think he's stronger as a shooter, he's also no slouch on defense. Usually, at the peak of his power, this is a man who, in 2023, shot a league-high 46.1% from 3, and he's typically a 40.3% shooter from deep. It fits right into what the Hornets want to do, seeing guys like LaMelo Ball and Con Neupel lead the league in three-pointers last season, to see Brandon Miller in the, at least top 10 of that, and to have the efficiency spike up to the level it did, especially as they were turning their season around last year. It fits in seamlessly with that nature of their game plan under Charles Lee. Now, again, seeing him drop to 34.9%, the second worst shooting season in his career, is actually a little concerning, but maybe not too much. You're not asking Grayson Allen to serve much of a role outside of that as he enters his age 31 season. You're not expecting that from him. He's just set to come in. He's going to give you some solid minutes as a 6'3" guard, and he's going to go about his day. That's really it. Crazy thing is, I didn't even know he spent time in Utah. But focusing on O'Neale as well, again, all around, when it comes to him being a strong defender, a great three-point shooter, and also, in terms of a true veteran presence, one that can truly be rallied around and trusted to carry themselves appropriately off the court, not just for their own sake, but to model that for the other young players out there. There might not be many players more fit for that role than Royce O'Neale. Man is consistently regarded as one of the best teammates in the league. One of the best. Across every team he's been on, from Utah to Brooklyn to Phoenix, they love him as a teammate. Now, granted, he's not necessarily an enforcer. Some other players that he goes up against may hate his living guts. But when you are on his team, you are absolutely a fan of his. And I have no doubt that above all else, is going to carry more weight for a team trying to rein in the future of their organization behind Brandon Miller and Con Neupel right now. It's going to pay massive dividends, far greater than anything else. It just so happens that Royce O'Neale averaged a career high in points last season and also is a career 38.9% shooter, though he shot another career high in 40.8% from three last year on a career high 6.7 attempts per game. Lethal. Again, he's not going to eat up the shot diet in the way that a guy like Miles Bridges would, in the way that a guy like LaMelo Ball would. He may not even start with this Hornets team, to be honest with you. But what he will do is, again, come in, give you those good spot minutes. He's going to keep that team steady when he's on the court, when he's off the court. And through it all, he is going to provide true veteran leadership that they need. With him, he will enter as the oldest player on the team by far, and it's legitimately not close, aside from the likes of Grant Williams and Grayson Allen. Therefore, he'll back up Naz Reid, and it does, from that standpoint, make their power forward position a little undersized. Royce O'Neale only stands at 6'6", but again, his defense is undoubtedly good, so that doesn't really matter. And it is a perfect complement, if they want to go small, to have a defender like that alongside Naz Reid, for example, who historically cannot defend. That is going to help a lot. This second unit has Grayson Allen here as well, alongside Zion James, Royce O'Neale, and Moussa Diabate, along with Christian Anderson. So again, we're fitting this very team-oriented build here of just having your young core in Neupel, Miller, and I guess they still choose to go with Steinbeck as a starter here. So you have those young guys getting it done on the first team. A good majority of these guys off the bench now in Anderson, in Allen, and in O'Neale can shoot the fucking lights out. That still has to be proven for Anderson. But of course, again, man fucking shot 41.5% from three in college. I'm sure that he can carry over a good amount of that into the pros. So you have those two things going down for the Hornets there, and you love it. And not to mention, again, you get another pick in your arsenal. You can afford to lose the second rounder, and you only have to give up one first rounder. That might be a bit expensive for the likes of those two players. The Suns left themselves no choice, fair enough. But you only have to send away that lone one to get back some quality talent and guys who can actually fit into this team very well without missing that much of a step compared to everyone else. It's actually a very good move from their standpoint. And a lot of people seem to be on the same page about that. But with that, it is now time to transition to the other end of this. Because, man, there was a crazy-ass rumor floating around for the Suns as soon as this deal was made. It said something like, hey, the Suns could now be on the market to trade for Ja Morant and conduct a deal with the Grizzlies to get him in the rights to their 2031 first-round pick back. Utter bullshit. Utter bullshit. Really? As the Suns team is constructed after this trade, they would really be on the market to go for Ja Morant and somehow have an ability to get their first round pick from 2031 back? The way they were talking about this, you'd think they could smell it from a mile away. that they were somehow actually going to swing that deal and pull it off to reverse the course of every single action it took for them, literally within just the span of the first few months from Matt Ishbia's arrival, to even pull off those moves that got the star players there in the first place, and the same ones that happened to force them to lose the rights to those draft picks. No, that's not how it works. Like, Ishbia has proven this entire time that they are just going to keep on swinging. To this point, they have missed every single fucking time. So to see that rumor, to see about just even a potential of Ja Morant somehow coming to this team and them being able to get their first round pick back from 2031 did not make a lick of fucking sense to me. It just felt like an absolute shot in the dark. Like, that's not how it works. You can't be as aggressive as the Suns have been for the past 3 years in a row and somehow, some way, expect to still get the better end of the deal. These past 3 years have shown that they haven't. And the jury would still be too early to suggest that the Miles Bridges end of the bargain here could go wrong. But again, only reason that this is made possible is because of all the previous shortcomings that they've had. And yet somehow they'd still be able to say, hey, at least we now have our one shining light of the future in this 2031 asset to hang our hats on. No, the fuck you don't. And guess what? It didn't happen. Because Ja Morant, for as poor as his value was, somehow, some way, they were able to find a different suitor. As yesterday, per Shams Charania, Ja Morant was traded from Memphis to Portland in exchange for Chris Murray and Jerami Grant. And again, I said it as well. Here I was thinking that the trade I just spent all this time talking about was going to throw me for a loop. And then you hear about this. Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. This is like, and again, there's a decent amount, including some other news, to get into in this particular video. But my goodness, I would be remiss to not spend time talking about this. Now, the obvious thing I probably can do is just to address the idea of Ja Morant in the first place. Because again, when I say that his value was incredibly low, you felt that. Like, it literally has been. In the same way that there was a mention that Miles Bridges had been involved in trade rumors for the past few years. It's been said that Ja Morant's value has been diminishing year over year. And honestly, in ways, you look at these two situations. Now, again, of course, at the same time that Miles Bridges was caught doing that, Ja Morant was rolling around with the guns in hand on IG Live 2 times, getting himself into altercations in real life with other people, with Andrew Nembhard and the Pacers as they were boarding a bus with a green light allegedly shed on them from one of his friends or something like that as they were about to leave on the team bus. In all the chaos surrounding that 2022-2023 season in particular, it was bad. Legitimately. Ja Morant faces suspension during that time as well that lasted about 25 games, and he had to serve all of them. Ever since that point, the value of a man who was once viewed as the best player, if you ask certain people especially after his 21-22 season and the run that the Grizzlies had during this point. They viewed him as the best player in the 2019 draft, an unquestioned franchise superstar, the next heir in Memphis, Tennessee for this Grizzlies squad. That was the kind of conversation surrounding Ja Morant just in 2022. Now, of course, he could not control himself getting injured in that playoff run that eventually ended the series for Memphis right then and there when it happened. But everything else after that, when you compare it to how the Hornets played this entire Miles Bridges thing, he got himself in trouble as well, but they waited to hike his value back up and then put him on the chopping block to send him away. A lot of this, you could look at the Grizzlies and you could say a number of different things. And we'll get there pretty shortly. But you have to understand that Ja Morant in this situation owns a lot of the responsibility as well. Obviously, the off-the-court issues are something that in that point of time, it felt like he just continued to have these situations pile on over and over and over again without any regard to, frankly, how this would look on him, how this would look as a representation of the very team he played for, and what this would do for his perception around the league. It soiled it. And you just started from there to hear a number of things about Ja Morant. In the immediate aftermath, the games were one thing of cost to him. But you also had, again, a series of injuries that once more took away a huge chunk, and I mean a huge chunk, of that 2023-24 season away from him, when he'd already had to deal with a suspension of 25 games. He only appeared in none that year. And it was at that point where, yes, the production when he was on the court was still somewhat fine. But you saw a lot of the same from Ja Morant. You could pencil it in for some highlight dunks, some transition plays, and some occasional breakdowns inside the paint for some highlight finishes. But you were not getting much progression outside of that. He still had yet to come about as a truly efficient facilitator. Although, by proxy, he had to be the primary ball handler for that team until Scottie Pippen Jr. in later seasons started to come along as a nice backup alongside him. And before then, Tyus Jones even off the bench in the non-Ja Morant minutes doing what he did for that team. Then you get to the shot as well. His efficiency, especially last season, was horrifically bad. In a year where it was mentioned that, Trae Young was a net negative for the Hawks when he was on the court. And it was getting to that same territory for Ja Morant in the few games that he did appear in last year. Especially from three-point range, which has never been a strength of his, admittedly. After a while, though, it gets to a point where when you have everybody saying in 2022, especially at the peak of everything, hey, if this guy can develop a three-point shot, it's over for the league. Wait till this guy gets a three-point shot. It's going to be scary if he works on his jump shooting. We've been waiting for 4 years, and he proceeded last year to shoot 23.5% from the three-point line. Let me repeat, 23.5%. And baked on all of that as well, you have the issues with Taylor Jenkins and apparent issues with the new offense under Thomas Izolo. Because Izolo, even with watching the press conference that he had with Richie Saunders, Karim Lopez, and also Cameron Boozer, obviously, to rein in the selections for the 2026 draft, it struck me multiple times. This man right here was talking about a team-oriented approach and talking about how he appreciated how Cameron Boozer, being the top selection of that draft, had a team-oriented approach in how he consistently won. Now, again, in terms of the pending transaction that they had at the time that they could not name, that was obviously Isaiah Stewart. But you couldn't help but listen to what Yizolo was saying at that time and not think about, damn, that might be a little bit of a shot at Ja. Because the idea under Jenkins especially was to center the entire offense around him. Make it a heliocentric approach, put shooters around him, trust Ja Morant to handle all the rest. And it worked for a little bit. But as he became more and more predictable, quite frankly, by not having a consistent three-point shot, teams started to pick up on that. And it slowed the offense down to the point where you literally had people just standing in the corner as Morant pounded the rock to get absolutely nowhere. That was the situation towards, I guess, the end of the 24-25 season. Now, again, I am not a fan of the fact that Jenkins was scapegoated and got fired at that point. But they bring in Yizolo, and instantly they start to shift it around to create more motion, to take away the usage rate from Ja Morant a little bit, and get other hands on the ball involved from a possession-to-possession standpoint. And it started to turn around for the Grizzlies, at least in theory. They were not necessarily winning games at a high level, but they were sharing the ball incredibly well. They seemed to be more efficient on offense, and so they stuck with this. Ja Morant, obviously wanting the ball in his hands, was not a fan of it. And throughout the entire year, you had several occasions of him, just addressing, I guess, a bit of a conflict with the coaching, a bit of a conflict with the front office, a conflict with other players like Vince Williams Jr., for example, in a game that they were set to have in Germany against the Magic. A guy who, again, they had gone to war with for quite some time, and who had the city of Memphis in his hands, quite frankly, was steadily losing his grip on it and making his emotions about that felt in the most damning of ways. So you combine all those three things: the attitude issue, the off-court problem, and the decline on the court. And as people put it around the league, to paraphrase some of what was said, like, you're essentially getting a nightmare scenario for a star player. The three worst things that you can say about a player in one sitting, the worst pairing of things, all apply to Ja Morant here. And as a result, his value diminished. Now, again, he can't control all of that, but he had a part in diminishing his own value by not working on his game, not expanding his range as a player, getting into this conflict and, not trying to apply himself to at least give the team-centered approach a bit of a shot, rather than trying to jack up the whole thing and just continue to hog the ball. He put himself at detriment in several ways throughout his Grizzlies tenure. And so when you see that the Grizzlies, literally, even before this trade came out, they were still reporting that they still could not find a shooter around the league who even wanted Ja Morant. Still, hours and days leading up to this, they still had yet to find one. The desperation for them was at an all-time high, with the way that they
moved on from some of their other assets as well, namely Jaren Jackson Jr. before him, which I said right then and right there, Ja Morant's going to be gone if that's happening. And then obviously moving on from Desmond Bane before all of that. The writing was on the wall. It was just a matter of who would actually, I guess, give the Grizzlies some grace and take their pity and pick up Ja Morant to do them a favor. Because Ja Morant, at the same time, he didn't get the max, but he was also currently and still is currently on a 5-year, $197 million deal. That's still a lot of money to take on. Expensive-ass contract for a player who genuinely has been on the decline for the past 4 years. Like, it's not even a joke. It's not even to say, just this to disparage him, because, there's still a chance that he can improve. He would just be entering his prime in his age 27 season. Crazy to say. There is still a chance for him to potentially turn it around, but you've hit a low point as a player when you have no existent value around the league. None. And we've seen this over the past few years. It just happened with Trae Young this year. They were in the same conversation. It happened with Bradley Beal a few years back. Like, there's a model of this over the past few years. And it does not seemingly bode well. You would hope that it goes different for Ja Morant here. And I would think that is what the Blazers are banking on. Now, we'll get to them in a second. But I will address the Grizzlies first. Now, again, I'm giving them, grace here for that. There weren't many other things they could have done with Ja Morant. There wasn't much else. His value was shot completely. What is a front office supposed to do at that point? Did they do themselves a favor by giving him that large contract? Well, they thought he could maintain his play for the next few years. They didn't plan for him potentially getting involved in all that stuff off the court. They didn't plan for him serving a 25-game suspension. They didn't plan for him getting injured at the rate that he did. And they trusted that his style of play could at least shift enough to keep this team in the running for the next few years. None of those things happened. None of those things ended up happening. By that time, they had no choice but to move on. His, I guess, apparent rift with those guys had an inverse effect on the team as well. Because it's yes, he may still be hurt, but, we are also actively out here trying to learn this offense, trying to go through all the growing pains, and you're going to bitch and complain about your role on the fucking team because you're not getting the ball? What the hell are we doing out here then? Sacrificing our time and energy to commit to this system under Uzalo and to try to at least give it a chance compared to you. Maybe you shouldn't be here then. At least that's how some players felt. I guess, Vince Williams Jr., for instance, before he got traded to the Jazz in the Jaren Jackson Jr. deal. You had to let that walk. Yes, he is a player who brought fans to seats, who invigorated an entire city for at least a good 2 to 3 years. When he got drafted in 2019. Every night, those guys lined up around the block. The fans, the other entertainers, like the rappers in Memphis, all trying to connect with Ja Morant because he was genuinely that good. Maybe he still is, but all those three things that I outlined were not worth the investment anymore. it just became overwhelming for them to deal with. And when it gets to that point, they were left with not much of a choice here. On the positive end, getting back Jerami Grant, because admittedly, Kris Murray's a throw-in. We can just, he's a throw-in. Okay? Jerami Grant will come in as a bit of an older player on this team. But I'm not going to lie, when Jerami Grant is at his A game, even though he is also a player actively on a 5-year, $160 million deal, and they take on the last 2 years of his contract that total around $70+ million, it's a lot. Grant has been through a weird career. This man was a part of the fucking process 76ers. He was with the Thunder during the Westbrook days. He spent time with Denver in the bubble. He all of a sudden turned into a number one option on the lowly Pistons in the early 2020s. So his role has been kind of you want to talk about a shapeshifter. They had the goal to call Nate Ament a shapeshifter on defense. Jerami Grant may very well be that kind of player just in general, not even just as an NBA journeyman. His role has consistently changed from team to team, from season to season. He had a year like that with Portland as well in 23-24, and then they asked him to take a step back just a little bit. Yet still, in this 25-26 season, Jerami Grant averaged 18.6 points per game with 45.3% shooting from the field and 38.9% shooting from deep. Now, his defense at his age 32 season might not end up being what it once was. But Jerami Grant ushering in a starting role now for this team provides them with some great size in their front court, seeing as he is a 6'7" forward. And they need that with just how small Scottie Pippen Jr. is, who is also now ushered in as a starter for this team. And I love that. Scottie Pippen Jr. has seen nothing but a rise over at least the past couple of seasons, and has had to log some extensive playing time with Ja Morant being out. And he has made the most of those opportunities and then some. You know, they say one man's trash is another man's treasure. And Scottie Pippen Jr. fits that to a T right now. Obviously, he has earned his role in this league. You got to think about it, because Scottie Pippen Jr. was literally a two-way player and a G League mainstay for at least a little bit of time. He didn't get formally called up until really his time in Memphis, because he was with LA, played only 6 games there, but again, just spot rotational minutes, just to get activated from time to time. It's not like he was getting a consistent burn there. Scottie Pippen Jr. has seen his load increase over the past couple of years. And sure, he only appeared in 10 games last season. He was dealing with injury as well. Yet in those 10 games, aside from his three-point shooting, he got off to a pretty hot start. I can imagine that he was probably on career high pace, if not for it. He is he will be around the same age as Ja Morant, just like a year and some change younger. Not too much, but, you have a player in him who will legitimately be able to move the ball around in ways that Ja Morant could not, even if the numbers will not suggest that, because he's going to get a higher amount of the reps now, being the lead guard. And, defensively, again, you have Coward, Grant, Boozer, all wings technically, and then Edey on your back end. You're not going to be able to always hunt Scottie Pippen Jr. It's not going to be an easy job. The Grizzlies have a roster where they can flank all of that with rigid defense and then some. So he'll be good there. But I like them getting Jerami Grant back in the deal. For the Blazers to move on from those two, and Grant and Murray with the direction that they're trying to take, I don't even have a problem with them being off the team. But this is a man-up trade. And it's just a testament to how low his value is, but also how shocking it was. I mean, fucking 3 first-round picks were moved, combined, for Allen, O'Neale, and Bridges. A guy who was regarded as the very face of this Grizzlies team got traded without any draft capital at all. At all. Think about that. This was Ja Morant we're talking about. And not one first round pick, not one, not even a pick, let alone, was sent the Grizzlies' way. Now again, the Grizzlies aren't losing sleep over that with the kinds of picks that they have acquired from all of these other deals. But whenever you have to blow up your team in the way that they have over the past few months, between, well, the past year and some change, with getting rid of that existing core of Bane Jackson Jr. and now Morant, you expect, at the very least for Morant, far more. If the Magic can send you 5 fucking first round picks for Desmond Bane, you can't even get one for Ja. That in and of itself is criminal. That is criminal to say. Not even one. Wild. Absolutely wild. And again, like, Chris Murray will probably, he's not going to be in the rotation for this team. It's a very real possibility he gets moved again. He would need to serve on this roster. If they were to keep Chris Murray, I don't even know. They still have a lot to sort out with some of their other wings, because Isaiah Stewart's going to get that time, but you could argue that guys like Taylor Hendricks and potentially Gigi Jackson Jr., Olivier Maxence Prosper are on the chopping block now with this move, and probably were already. I don't see where Chris Murray would fit into that equation. It's nothing against him as a player. I just genuinely don't know right now for him. But that's just wild. They were calling this man a potential face of the league candidate in 2022, and his value has been sent so far down the fucking shitter that he is essentially, in the language of this trade, worth nothing of that sort, outside of a 32-year-old wing who does not have a defined role, and Chris Murray. It's not much to write home about from Memphis. But the whole idea was to get Ja Morant off their team. You just want to see them come away with something of much greater value, and they just were not able to pull it off. I think that reveals to you right there just how desperate they were to move on from him. Because you look at it that way, and you look at the fact that they don't get back draft capital. You would view that as a bad trade, and they still said, we're going to sign off on it. Because we have to get this headache off our team. And you're like, damn. Ja Morant has to use that as fuel. He needs to actually take time this summer and work on his craft. He needs to try to focus strictly on basketball. And he has to find a way to adjust his role in order to maximize this next few years of his career, resuscitate some of that value, and then go from there. That's got to be the idea in his mind right now. It's got to be. Because, having all of that be said is crazy. It absolutely is. It's not like they're totally wrong. Morant has to own that. And he has to put in the work to improve that. It's as simple as that. Now, for Portland, doing it with them is going to be... Oh my gosh. Man, yo. There's no doubt that Portland is getting the better player, with Ja Morant also having like a couple years or so left on his deal now. What the fuck are they going to do with him? What are they going to do with him? What are they going to do with him? Like, this is, oh man, there's so much here. And I already outlined 3 things that jumped out to me immediately in a different medium. 3. And they weren't even the full extent of everything, but they are important. Your spacing's cooked. Your spacing is fucking cooked, man. It's cooked. It is cooked. It's cooked. I already mentioned that he shot 23.5% from 3 last year. 23.5%. Like, it does not help them that already, when you look at how things were for them last year, they already shot 30.2% from 3-point land as a team. And it ranked them pretty much, when you look at this, not even just on the postseason level. Because again, it carried over that bad fortune and it hurt them tremendously. That percentage of, 34.3% in the regular season, rather, still ranked them 3rd worst in the league. And you are bringing in a shooter now who needs the ball in his hands to do primary damage, yet is so abhorrent from 3-point land that it's not even below average. It's below average from 3-point range. When you're talking about Ja Morant here. And we are now asking him to bring that to this team when the entire game plan for them was seemingly to improve their 3-point shooting. So you move on from a player in Grant who was not necessarily part of the problem from 3-point land individually, and you bring in a player shooting 15% worse. What effect would that have on the rest of the team if the next thing is true? Because in terms of touches, Deni Avdija, by proxy, became their primary ball handler last season. And in theory, bringing in Ja Morant gives you a true point guard to work with, something that the Blazers have still been searching for. If he was a much better, more efficient playmaker, that would make a lot of sense to say. And it's not impossible by any means for that to be the case. But 2 things can be true at the same time. You can't shoot, yet you know that a player in Avdija specifically, who can occasionally shoot the 3 ball, he was one of the top 2 players in the league in drives per possession, or at least drive percentage last year. Top 2. He's going to need his touches, and when he gets those touches, he is going to do similarly what Ja Morant would do with the ball in his hands. Not exactly pound the rock, but try to get downhill, try to slash to the rim, and try to draw contact up high. That is what Avdija did all last year. And it worked for him, turning it into an all-star season. You're now going to take that away because Ja Morant will need his touches in order to really strive in this offense. I don't know if I'm a big fan of that. And then the third thing, in case you didn't know, Damian Lillard's with the team. Now, as they have this constructed right now, to add another layer to this, number 4, they have a starting lineup of Scoot Henderson, Jrue Holiday, Toumani Camara, Deni Avdija, and Donovan Clingan. What do you think that means? Ja Morant could potentially slide into that role because he is still listed as injured right now. He'd come off the bench. He'd come off the bench. What? Oh, they wouldn't be able to take that. The hardcore Ja Morant fans would not be able to handle it. That for any point of time, since his rise as a superstar caliber player in this league, he'd be coming off the bench. Oh, hell no. But something's got to give. It was happening with Scoot Henderson when he was injured as well last year. And Damian Lillard also is hurt. When they both come back, and if they both come back, they have done the dumbest shit. And they've kept playing around with this too. Because they put it on fucking Instagram, NBA on ESPN. They fucking put the projected starting lineup is Damian Lillard, Ja Morant, Jrue Holiday, Deni Avdija, and Donovan Clingan. I'm sorry, what a... They cannot both start. They can't both start. That's the problem that you have right now. You brought back Damian Lillard for a reason, and he wants to be back and retire a Blazer. You're bringing Ja Morant here, and you have Kendrick Perkins already saying that this potentially in the same way that we were labeling it for DeAndre Ayton as his last chance to succeed in the league. Now we're saying the same thing for Ja Morant, but you're asking him to play potentially alongside Damian Lillard. It will not be able to work out that way. If you truly want to maximize the most out of Damian Lillard, and you also want to ensure that the team can perform well, that's just going to be a dynamic that's going to have to, that is going to need some work. They cannot start together. As a defensive unit, they will constantly be attacked by every single team that faces off against them. We have to establish this point right now. You need Jrue Holiday in that lineup as a defender. And you need Toumani Camara in that lineup as a defender. He could play the 3, he could play the 4, whatever the case may be. They have Deni Avdija listed as a power forward right now. Fine, whatever. You need those two specifically. Clingan will be there as a defensive back-end piece no matter what. Those two have to be in the starting lineup. It cannot be a Morant-Lillard combination. That will not work. I am telling you that right now. Right now. Especially on the offensive end as well. And when you tie it into some of the other things, when it comes to Avdija being the primary ball handler, you're asking Ja Morant to play off the ball? That's a disaster waiting to happen. probably spans back much further than this. The motherfucker has literally been the primary ball handler on every team he's been on since Murray State in college. And again, you're going to have to give Avdia a large chunk of the touches here. You really expect Morant to all of a sudden, in the prime of his career, adjust his game completely to become an off-ball movement player. He's never learned it. It's not impossible to learn, but he's never gotten to that point in the first place. Never. And it would help if he could actually shoot the three ball. But again, what's that magic number that I've kept on reiterating? 23.5%. What's the point of playing him off the ball when they're going to leave his ass open anyways if he gets the rock anywhere behind the three-point line? They'll dare him to shoot. And then if he drives, he'll see a crowd. Because who else will be trying to drive? Deni Avdia. Because who else will be trying to crash the glass? Donovan Clingan. Like, there's just a lot going on. It is not even to completely pile on Portland. But there is just a lot that is fishy about this shit. There's a lot of it. The pacing of their team improves greatly. And they also, with that, they can improve their proficiency in the transition game as well. Morant and Shaedon Sharpe, as athletic as those guys are, not to mention Avdia pushing the pace, not to mention Jrue Holiday's defense, like that is going to be a core strength for this team. But all those negatives are going to be true, and there is legitimately more to go on here. I just have to address them briefly because there's still a lot to be mentioned here. But again, full context matters in deals like this. Full context matters, man. So I'm here for it. Because, they have him starting right now, but, bruh. They were saying it too, like, Scoot Henderson, bruh. Oh, man is just going through it. Man's going through it. He can't control himself getting hurt last year. And to be fair, to his credit, in the playoff series against the Spurs, he did actually have a solid game. He was the reason why they won, I believe, Game 2, even if people will still perpetrate, and Wembanyama himself would say, okay, if he was healthy and did not get concussed, they probably could have swept them. You can do with that information what you will. But Scoot Henderson legitimately came alive in that specific performance for them and led them to victory. So that's fair. But legitimately adding to the problem here, the Blazers wouldn't necessarily make the deal if they trusted that Scoot Henderson was taking the full jump. Now, again, you've seen flashes from time to time, but he genuinely hasn't gotten there yet. And I mean, they knew what they signed up for. A John Wall-esque player who could use his athleticism to his advantage, who was not the same kind of passer as John Wall, and who did have some efficiency problems coming out of G League Ignite. All those things have reigned true for him to this point. All of them. I don't know if Ja Morant is the kind of point guard you want to learn from right now. And even then, you can say that, at least Scoot Henderson's a league average 3-point shooter. At least he is that. If nothing else, right now. But, man. It's just, think about everything that got him here in the first place. Because the notion in 2023 that they were going to draft a guard is why he was taken and why Damian Lillard initially left this team. Legitimately contemplated even leaving this team for the first time in his fucking career. And the exit was ugly. He had gone through a whole press run about it and how disgruntled he was by this. He'd even, around the time that the trade itself to Milwaukee took place, it involuntarily involved Jrue Holiday as well. They're connected again, I guess. Right? He even made a fucking song about it. So, you trigger that again with bringing Damian Lillard back. Although he's probably, understanding he's on the back end of his career and he might not make as much noise around it. But you reinforce that. And you also surround him with another guard who will likely have to initiate offense in the same way. And who is likely going to get a starting rep over him. Just put Scoot Henderson in limbo. What can he really do? Would he even be trusted to get the same quality reps as he once did? Has he ever really gotten the quality reps? You can argue not. And I guess another issue, the guards have consistently shifted into six-man roles. It was Scoot Henderson for a time in 24-25. It's been Shaedon Sharpe for a time last season. And they have him coming off the bench again. Because Shaedon Sharpe, he got extended. He is a solid player. But outside of the athleticism, there is really not much else he offers you consistently right now. So many guards between the likes of Sharpe, Henderson, Holiday, Morant now, Blake Wesley, Vic Krejci, CD Sissoko is listed as a power forward for some reason. He's a fucking guard. Okay, Caleb Love was in the rotation. He's a fucking guard. Like, what are you supposed to do with all that? It's the same situation the Bulls were in. How's the saying go? There's only one ball. Damn it. You can't. There's only one ball. Like, fuck. Like, literally. The Blazers want to become relevant, which this trade also helps them with that. I get it. I understand it totally. You need the veteran presence there, and you need a balance of young guys as well. This is just complete and total overkill. How the fuck are you supposed to sustain a quality rotation with that? They're going to have some difficult decisions ahead of them. Because you will need that in a way. You need Shaedon Sharpe's athleticism. You need CD Sissoko's defense. You need Vic Krejci in his three-point shooting. Nigga was right on par with Luke Kennard in three-point accuracy last year. You need him. He would probably stay. But it's just like, if it would help if they were a little more versatile in their skill sets. None of them are. So that's the situation the Blazers are in right now. They have themselves the better player, clearly. But, like... Oh! And then all these guys have to learn a new offense under Mike Nori, who is being fucked over with only one guaranteed year on his contract to show you just how cheap this team still fucking is. It's just a weird time for Portland right now. They get the better player in the deal at what cost to be determined, literally. Not to mention they didn't have a draft pick this year. They got an instant F grade for that because of that fact. Like, there's a lot going on. As long as they, again, get to the point where, hey, they took the right steps last season. Can we continue to improve on that? Can we keep getting ourselves in the playoff race every year? If we can do that, they've succeeded. If they can do that. But man, I don't know. So again, that'll do it for those specific trades. I spent a long time talking about them. But again, it's fair play. It's fair play, man. It's only right. It's only right. So I guess with some of this other stuff, I'll give some brief context, but I gotta try to run through it quickly because there is another situation here that does deserve a fair amount of attention. That's just the time we're in, right? So moving on to the Suns, who per Shamsharani, and again, all these are pretty much per him. They signed Mark Williams to a 3-year, $38 million deal that prevented him from entering free agency. It makes sense for them, I would think. Ironically enough, it was yet another trade facilitated by the Hornets that got Mark Williams there in the first place after the failed physical that would have sent him to the Lakers. He has given them decent production. You need a solid center on that back end, and Mark Williams has been that. It's just about how they continue to involve him, because adding Miles Bridges to the equation makes things a little more crowded. You're asking Mark Williams to be a lob threat in that system and somewhat of a defensive anchor. The latter is yet to be determined, but he should be able to do fine. Again, having a vertical threat in both of those positions. If you have a playmaker who can actually get them the ball on time and on target, aside from Devin Booker, things should go just swell for this Phoenix team in that regard. The Thunder, on the other hand, would trade Isaiah Joe to the Pistons in exchange for 2 future second rounders. And honestly, I think that is something that the Pistons don't really care about right now. Second rounders are, they can have value in some way, but considering everything that the Pistons have gone through, over just the past couple of years and the rise that they have taken to become a team in the hunt for potential championship contention so fast, they don't give a shit about that. They believe that they'll be in that mode for years to come, especially with Cade Cunningham at the helm. The idea for them was to always find some more shooting and some primary creation secondary creation outside of Cade Cunningham. Isaiah Joe can at least give you the shooting. I mean, he's been regarded as one of the better sharpshooter types in the league since he's been drafted. And to think that, hey, he was, ironically enough, a second-round pick. So you essentially, at that point, you get one back to send away to. And they're in the future, far down the line. That doesn't mean anything to you right now. He's a career 40.6% shooter, to the point where on 6 attempts, he shot a career high 42.3% last season. His volume should see a rise in that Pistons system. And it would remind you pretty much of one player who will be mentioned in just a second. Because quite literally, everything that happened with said player is the reason why the Pistons, have been on a search for a sharpshooter since that time. With the Tim Hardaway Jr.'s, with the Duncan Robinsons, with the Simone Fontecchios, with the Kevin Huerters even, who there will also be something on in just a second. We'll get there. Jose Alvarado declined his player option, and the Knicks proceeded to sign him to a 3-year, $14+ million deal. He wanted to return there. It was a priority for him. He is a hometown kid in every sense of the word, and there's no doubt that he kind of, with his substitution, he changed the tone of that series in the non-Brunson minutes a little bit versus the Spurs. So, you take that into account. It was a trade deadline acquisition as well, and it couldn't have worked out any better for the Knicks. I mean, that was around the time where, the shit was still chaotic as fuck. They were turning it around a little bit, though, when he got there. So, there's a massive credit to him, and he earned that contract, every cent of it. The Thunder also signed Isaiah Hartenstein to a 3-year contract extension that totaled his monies up to over $130 million. He was already on like a 3-year contract as it was. So they just add more to that. And granted, playing alongside Chet Holmgren, his value, his presence was much needed and much felt when he was out there. Not just as a rebounder, not just as a guy to block Wemby off the fucking glass, but quite literally. His playmaking is still some of the best you can have at the center position in the NBA today. And, even though they may lose a guy like Isaiah Joe, you're still bringing in guys through the draft and retaining some of your pieces that can still fill out those catch and shoot roles. And that can still, rein in those Hartenstein assists, rack up those numbers like crazy, and be an elite shooter in the process. So he, from that standpoint, he's got to stick around. The Celtics signed Ron Harper Jr. to a standard 3-year, $9 million contract. Get your money. I mean, they already got him out of the 2-way contract, gave him a standard deal, and they're tacking onto that now. It is a great time in that Harper household. I'm telling you, man. Harper Jr. being older and, going through the cycle of the NBA a little bit more than Dylan up to this point in time. He'd been through the ringer a little bit. And, now having some form of security with this team, even if it might not be the amount that all players would probably seek, it's still something that's going to set him up nicely for the future. Fred VanVleet would opt into his $25 million player option. So, in these situations, because we have a lot of players declining into player options, the player has the decision to take at least a lesser deal in these instances. Or if they were to decline it, they'd be able to get a larger deal, maybe with the team, maybe elsewhere. That is essentially how these player options work. With VanVleet doing so, his contract was one of the most expensive and the most expensive of all time for an undrafted player. As I was saying, people had a problem with it. He obviously could not control himself getting hurt last year, but considering where the team was, he decided that he would take the friendlier, more optimal contract and go for the $25 million instead. Now, you can't say that for everybody, because James Harden, on the other hand, would decline his $42.3 million player option in order to sign a potential multi-year deal. It's not shocking. Harden has historically not honored these player options. He will decline them religiously in order to make sure that he is maximizing the most of his money. And, when you have been in this for as long as he has, at this point, he is one of the more valuable players in the NBA outright, with the kind of contract money he's gained over the years. Not to mention some of the other sponsorships that he's had outside of the NBA itself. It would just be great for him to, you see what a guy like Jalen Brunson did last year, and, although $42.3 million is still a lot on a team that has the highest payroll right now, and that may still have to go over this conversation with Donovan Mitchell of all people. Any amount of a pay cut may help you. Now, is James Harden going to listen there? No. And man, that would just be the worst. I don't even want to know how much that multi-year deal could be worth, because it will continue to keep this Cavs team cap-strapped. They need far more than they have at this point. And the minute that those contracts are signed, they're going to be right back where they started, having to settle for all these rental deals in all these short-term contracts with flyers on these players who don't even have the talent to really coalesce with the entire team. Zach LaVine, on the other hand, opted into his $49 million player option. And honestly, I was looking at it, per the Shams Charania post, somebody frankly put it best. He's not getting that kind of money elsewhere. Zach LaVine is another one of those players who has seen his value diminish greatly over the last few seasons. And even I'm saying, like, hey, the Kings, even in the midst of all this, I'm still of the belief that you need to move on from him. You have to. You need to make this about the young guys. You know, it's putting a lot on him, but this should be the Darius Acuff Jr. show. This should be focused mainly on some of the other guys that you brought in, like Maxime Reynaud. It should not be about the DeRozan, LaVine, and Sabonis show any longer. It is done. It's done. Now, if he opts into it, he opts into it. There's not much that you can do about that, all right? But, like, legitimately, it has failed. So, yeah, there's no way, man. There is no way. And, I tell you, man. Now, again, back to the player. I think you would understand who it may be. You have to go back. Obviously, I've had, like, several instances of talking about this, and, you know, they're not that hard to find, considering the timeline. But Malik Beasley has obviously been involved in an investigation over the past year and change into sports gambling that was allegedly conducted across 4 games in the 2023-24 season. At least that is the sample size that these other prosecutors were looking at. And across this whole time, Beasley has been out of the league. He was trying to sign a deal, and they ramped up the investigation around this time last year. So it kept him out of the team and off the team for the entire season, which is what made them go after Duncan Robinson in the first place. And then Kevin Huerter at the trade deadline, and the Pistons, of course, him still having a connection there. Obviously, Beasley had an accomplished season, totaling 316 three-pointers with them in the season prior to all of this. And yet, we're here now because of these illegal practices and a lot of other stuff surrounding Malik Beasley. Like, genuinely, this is not even the first thing. For a full timeline, you know, the AP kind of put it perfectly here and, you know, summarizing a little bit of everything. In quotes here, it says that Beasley's financial problems have been widely reported, including disputes with a Detroit landlord, a Milwaukee barber, and a Minnesota dentist. In 2025, when the Pistons were in New York for a playoff game, he was served with a lawsuit from a local sports marketing agency, which subsequently got $1 million default judgment against Beasley. End quote. And it's crazy. You know, you consider the amount of money he's earned, and he is still having to pay back an entire agency. He is still getting into all of these quarrels with other civil workers because of failing to compensate them properly for a variety of reasons that I have no way of knowing in my shoes. Was just genuinely a wild thing to uncover at the time. And of course, you know, even though it had been a little bit since, you know, everything was publicly reported, the investigation has continued. They've tried to get more insight onto how things have transpired, and it culminated in a report yesterday that, is kind of in line with how things have gone in terms of these gambling investigations over the past few years for the NBA. It turns out that Beasley and a good amount of others were involved in this specific cycle of sports betting. It was not just him. According to ESPN, CBS Sports, and other sources, quote, Malik Beasley has been indicted on illegal sports gambling charges by federal prosecutors in the United States District Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of New York, along with 5 others, including fellow former NBA player Ed Davis. Beasley, Davis, and the 4 other named co-defendants face charges of sports bribery, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, honest services fraud, and conspiracy to commit money laundering. The news comes exactly 1 year after Beasley's name was originally connected to a federal sports gambling investigation. On June 29, 2025, with Beasley and the Detroit Pistons closing in on a 3-year, $42 million contract, word broke that he was part of an investigation into allegations of gambling on NBA games and prop bets. End quote. Now again, similar to, like hearing this language again, an indictment does not mean that there is a conviction, but it means that we have all right to believe that we are one step closer to one, that we have so much evidence against you that we can nab you on something and will nab you on something by the time that this is all said and done in a court of law. So this is where Beasley finds himself. It doesn't mean that he's been formally convicted of anything. But man, the evidence held against him and all these other people right now are wild. It just does not paint a great picture for him at all. At all. Like, you just have countless ties here. They mention that when it comes to Davis's involvement in this, quote, Beasley and Davis, who allegedly became friends while playing for the Minnesota Timberwolves during the 2020-21 season, concocted the scheme for the 23-24 season, according to the federal indictment. Davis, who the indictment calls Beasley's gatekeeper in the gambling ring, offered to loan Beasley money to pay off millions of dollars in gambling debts, according to federal prosecutors, which Beasley would pay off by helping ensure the co-conspirators won their bets. End quote. So even during this time, as the documents in the indictment allege and outline here, he was still dealing with the gambling issues even back to this point. And his financial status had been in limbo up to this time. Now, again, it's one thing to have that connection with a former teammate that goes beyond basketball, especially when you see how some of these players are so connected with each other off the court in the most personal ways with each other. You look at like some of these other previous championship teams. It's been going around about the 2016 Cavs squad and how they just spent a shit ton of time together just hanging out with each other. Like, stuff like that is cool when it comes to, the player-player relationship outside of the sport and off the playing surface. Well, clearly with Davis and Beasley here, potentially having some involvement in that. And Davis really believing with his involvement in this that he may have been helping out his buddy. They get themselves into something that can, from their own viewpoints, help them financially be set. Especially Beasley. When you're on hard luck like that, again, desperate times will call for some of the more desperate measures. And frankly, with seemingly not a lot of other places for Beasley to turn at this point on his own doing, if he were to have lost that much money that quickly, Davis figuring that he was doing him a favor, decided to set him up with some co-conspirators. Now, as these articles say, and as we see here, the other few co-defendants here include Rob Gorodetsky, Ernesto Plasencia, and William Brown, along with Paulo Zamorano, who was also an agent of Ed Davis, though they hadn't been in custody. And there was also an unnamed collegiate coach who was a former D1 player working as a D2 coach, also implicated in this finding as well. So we've seen how much has gone down in the college basketball scene with all these gambling investigations as well. So it's a very slippery slope, to say the least, right now. In regards to all of this, it's just, once more, you see a league like this laying down the hammer when the NBA themselves does have working relationships with FanDuel, with DraftKings, with Bet365, with Underdog Sports, with PrizePicks, mainly, as well. A lot of these sites still being promoted in several ways by the athletes themselves, by the league themselves. Yet a player cannot get involved in it. It was the same scenario surrounding Jontay Porter, who was banned for life. The same situation involving Rozier III, Jones, and Billups, which is still going on right now, and could honestly have an effect on that as well. You know, same story here with that. It's not great practice to have your athletes and your players and your officials like Donaghy and other members actively involving themselves in that. But if you're going to promote it yourself at the same time, what good does it really do? I don't know. Now again, that doesn't make what happened right. It's just trying to give perspective to things. Like this quote from attorney Jusuf Nurkic Jr. is fair, from ABC News and from other sources. Quote, bribery and insider betting schemes like this one involving former NBA players and a current NBA player agent who exploited inside information for profit erode the integrity of American sports and victimize the sports watching public. End quote. That is true. All this shit into, fixing games and everything like that, it can lead people to believe that we're not watching this stuff genuinely play out in real time. That at any point, any suspicion of having something more happening behind the scenes influencing what we're seeing on the court, that could creep in, and that could completely derail the viewing experience, derail the trust that you're trying to build amongst that demographic. So yeah, hey, that's fair. It's just, can we actually work harder to, not really give this the platform that it deserves? Because just having this connection will naturally drive some players to go against the status quo and do it anyway. That's how it has been in the collegiate scene, with entire teams, several teams being found to have those practices take place. And even those teams are facing sanctions as a result of it. So, saying that is still not going to stop people. And very clearly, it did not stop Beasley, it did not stop Davis, and it did not stop these other people. Even though I understand, having a sports agent as well involved in this, it's very slimy business. Very slimy. I mean, damn. Like, that's just a whole nother level right there. I did not know that was the case until this indictment, that another agent in whole had been involved in this. In other cases similar to this one, there had been multiple people implicated, but I didn't expect anything like that. So yeah, they have several examples and texts from all of this, and I mean, like, for example, one of them from Davis himself, as the indictment has laid out, states that, quote, in December 2023, only way you can beat Vegas is sports betting. We can make some good money. Of course you can. That was the idea. That was the idea to get yourself involved in this in the first place, was to get money out of it. That's just the full-fledged truth. There is no shaking that idea whatsoever. This all boils down to money at the end of the day. All of it. And it does corrupt a lot. When you consider that after that text and, with the sample size they looked at, all 4 of the games that they found these illegal practices in took place in 2024. And in literally the span of a couple months, less than a couple months. January 26th, when he was with the Bucks this year, against the Cavs. February 27th, against the Hornets. March 10th against the Clippers. And March 21st against the Nets. Less than 2 whole months of evidence in those games could now put Beasley and these other defendants in some very serious territory here. Like all of it is out there. For this January 26th game, for example, allegedly the under was placed on Beasley because he told them as such at this time that he was going to underperform on that betting line. And he finished with only 3 rebounds in that game. Getting them all the money that they needed at the time. Moving on to the game against the Clippers, for example. In another example, this motherfucker, okay, quite literally, as they texted, because he said that he was going to overperform this time on the betting line of 3.5 rebounds. This nigga right here rushed over, barreled past the entire team just to get a rebound. As the text from Brown to Placencia states, quote, he got 1 rebound with 1.1 second left. He pushed Bucks teammate Pat Connaughton out of the way. They were literally celebrating the fact that he had picked it up. Someone texted as well that they were 1.1 seconds away from being down thousands of dollars. End quote. As some of the other articles were framing it. Like, that shit ain't gonna have an effect on the game. The result was already decided. And your ass, similar to fucking Ricky Davis, you are sprinting that far down the fucking court for a rebound, my nigga. In a low leverage situation. Pushing Pat Connaughton out of that direction just to nab the ball. Everybody else is thinking about what they're gonna potentially eat for dinner after the game. Thinking about something else that they maybe could have improved on during the course of action. Maybe they have something to tend to at home. A lot of different thoughts could be on a player's mind at that point. Your ass is thinking about the fact unconsciously, in the middle of fucking gameplay, per all of this information we have, that you have to grab that rebound in order to not lose even more money. The things that people will do, man, oh man, oh man. Insanity. Then we get to the last example that they use for the March 21st game against the Nets. As they say here, quote, the scheme allegedly fell apart in the March 21st game against the Nets when Beasley went over on his rebounding prop. He was supposed to go under based on information provided by Davis. The defendants demanded Davis either pay them for the lost wagers or work with Beasley to fix future bets, according to the indictment. Davis allegedly agreed to the latter, but backed out after news broke that Jontay Porter was under federal investigation for a similar fixing scheme. End quote. Like I said, Jontay Porter was banned for life from the NBA in 2024 as a result of all this. And this investigation leading up to that decision happened right around the same time when Davis pretty much panicked, potentially seeing what was to come and not necessarily being a fan of the consequences that he might end up facing if all of this were to come out. Now it has, and we still have reached the same impasse regardless. But that's what affected and I guess seemingly put a stop to all of that for the meantime. At least in this outright manner. You know, of course there could have been other examples of this, but this is just the, bunch that they use to cite their cause and their case here. So there's still a lot to be figured out here. But it's heavy, man. We've already talked about, the NBA is really, trying to root all of this shit out. Because, you can say that they are not the first. And with a lot of the names that still have not been uncovered in some of the other, adjacent gambling investigations here, there are still many to be uncovered. There is more to come. So it's something like this where, even if a case like this might see an end, this is still, far from done. Because the league has now taken the stance that they are not allowing this to stick around any longer. They are not, under any circumstances, allowing this to take place on their watch. Under any circumstance. So, they are coming after everyone. They are not playing a game with anyone. It is as simple as that. And as a result, again, you think that players of their positions, and Davis and Beasley specifically, and then even with the agent here, you think that they would be well off and that they would not have to rely on this kind of stuff at all, let alone, even engage in this activity in the first place. Yet they made an executive decision to do so. And as a result, they are now facing severe penalties. They did not necessarily outline the sentencing, I believe, that they could face here. But I'm sure that, if they were to be convicted of something at all, they would face a very severe sentence. That much is true. I would have reason to believe that, but they never stated it, so I'm not going to assume that that will be the case. Let's see. Yeah. So, just had to provide an update on that because, it's the sensible thing to do. Just needed to make sure that I gave myself enough time for that. Literally. That's an important topic. I could not gloss over talking about it. Could not avoid it. Literally. Yeah. Alright, so let's see. Moving on to some other news in regards to a lot of contracts, a lot of player options. Draymond Green declined his $27.7 million player option to become a free agent. Now, again, even in the event that this happens, declining the player option doesn't necessarily mean that you are going to outright leave the team. It just means that when it happens, you are working out a deal that can be even friendlier between you and the team. Of course, Draymond Green at this point was serving a 4-year, $100 million contract, if I'm not mistaken. This option year must have been baked into that, and so he had a decision to make. From a loyalty standpoint, this would have been a bit of an increase from what he would have had on a per-year basis compared to, some of the other contracts he's had, right? Would be a bit of an uptick. He is deciding to take a little bit less here. He's still actively negotiating with the Warriors right now, and apparently they're expected to make a swing. It's all just tying in together. The rumors have been from several credible sources, including Shams Charania, that they are searching for talent in the form of LeBron James and Anthony Davis, trying to bring them together by potentially trading Jimmy Butler III and then having Draymond Green work out a contract that is worth far less to give them the flexibility to add in a $15 million kicker for a trade and free up more room to generally make all of this work. Yeah, that is the existing rumor right now. To add more fuel to the fire with LeBron James, to just tie it in now, per Shams Charania, literally just an hour ago, as I'm recording this, he has formally told the Lakers that he will be playing elsewhere. And Draymond Green, to add more fuel to the fire, I guess, on X post, he posted a fucking Batman signal, promoting an episode of his show literally today. So again, a lot of it is speculation right now. People are all over the place. Let me say this and let me say this right now, and I will likely end up posting this. I do not want LeBron on this fucking team. I do not want Anthony Davis on this fucking team. I don't. Niggas are saying, oh, the entire league should be behind this. Already one of the older teams. In fact, literally the Warriors and the Clippers were the oldest teams in the league last season. The fit with LeBron would be horrible. As it is. Be horrible. Then you're bringing in a man in Anthony Davis who literally can't stay healthy. Only a couple of years or so younger than Jimmy Butler III. And Jimmy Butler III would actively be coming off of an injury himself. How the fuck are you going to convince Jimmy Butler III also, if all this stuff really were to go down? You're expecting him to be traded to the fucking Wizards. Man, he will create such a fucking hellfire in that arena, they will reroute him instantly. There wouldn't, it would be the same thing. It's the same thing that happened for Chris Paul to get to the fucking Warriors in the first place. It's the same thing. Why would he sign off on that? You'd have to have mutual agreement. And I just do not buy the notion that everyone would be bought into that idea. At least everyone who would need to be traded in order to get there. I just do not like the idea of that. I may be one of the few, but I'm standing on that. Even if it were to somehow magically happen. No. I'm not convinced that shit would work. Not convinced by it. Sandro Mamukelashvili declined his $2.8 million player option to become a free agent. The Nets, on the other hand, signed Josh Minott to a 2-year, $9 million contract extension, as well as Day'Ron Sharpe, who also got a 2-year, $20 million contract extension, which makes sense for Sharpe. I think he's sliding right into the starting position with Claxton now being gone. It gives him an opportunity to, for one of the first times in his NBA career, really get some starter level reps. He's mainly been a backup for his entire career, and this would be the time now for Sharpe to maybe prove himself as a little bit more than what the Nets previously thought his value was. So that's going to be really interesting to explore. DeAndre Ayton opted into his $8.1 million player option. Similar to Zach LaVine, you will have some players opt into those deals because they figure that, hey, no other team would be willing to give them that caliber of a contract. Similarly to Zach LaVine, they need to boot DeAndre Ayton's bitch ass out of here. I'm not even fucking joking. That nigga needs to be gone. The Lakers had their opportunities to draft a center even, and whiffed on those opportunities. They have been rumored to potentially go after guys like Jarrett Allen and Daniel Gafford. They should try their luck at it. DeAndre Ayton cannot remain a part of that fucking team. He just can't. He can't. Real shit. I already said as much in the recap after they got swept, okay? He needs to go. Simple as that. The Raptors opted into Trayce Jackson-Davis' $2.4 million team option. This being an example of a team having more control of a decision. The team can either buy into a deal that they have baked into setting up for a player, or they can cut the tie there and force said player to become a free agent, which some teams did end up opting to do. Later, at least. The Heat, on the other hand, signed Andrew Wiggins to a 3-year, $64 million contract extension to return to the team. He had a potential $30 million option or something like that on the table, so he took less money here, and he's going to stay. Now, again, with the production that he's giving them on top of, what they currently have right now, they have to settle in a way for, some cheaper options here. And Wiggins, you love to see that, considering what it took for the Warriors to get the 2022 ring. He's implementing some of that a little bit right now by taking a lesser deal, trying to, still contribute in the best way that he can to this team, and giving them some room to potentially add more players down the line. Some people were also believing that this could force Norman Powell out. I don't know how true that is. I guess that is something to monitor over at least the next few days. We will see what happens there, though. Marcus Smart declined his $5.4 million player option to become a free agent. So the Lakers will now be in a spot where, hey, they can work out a deal with him, or he may genuinely want to go elsewhere. And the Cavs signed Thomas Bryant to a 1-year deal, keeping him around randomly in a, death chart surrounding Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley. That's just a little weird. Bradley Beal declined his $5.6 million player option to become a free agent. Also, once more, we're dealing with another player where, quite literally, the Wizards had such trouble initially moving Bradley Beal off their team that nobody wanted him. for at least not many teams. You found your home, seemingly with the Suns, and then they instantly sign you to a 5-year, $250 million deal that is still pretty much in my time watching basketball live. I'm not going to say in my lifetime. There have been worse in my lifetime. It's one of the worst fucking contracts I've ever fucking seen. Watching basketball. This would be since 2013. At the very least, 2014. Like, yeah, literally, one of the fucking worst. And nobody wanted him when the Suns made the decision to move on from him. Nobody wanted him. Nobody. We're in the same boat again. Because, to be a little fair, Bradley Beal didn't even play all that much. I wasn't really expecting him to do a lot with the Clippers as it was, but he didn't play. He was hurt. So it did not go according to plan. I don't know what makes him believe now that, like, I don't know. Are you trying to potentially work out negotiation with this team? That could be an option for him. If he's trying to go elsewhere, what team would truly take him on? What team believes that they would benefit from having them on their roster? There aren't many, if any at all, who would say that with conviction and with a straight face. So that's just a little interesting to me. The Kings traded Devin Carter and a second rounder to the Hawks straight up. I kind of get that. You know, you bring in another small guard like Akif Jr. You are kind of expecting him to be the focal point of that team for the next few years. Devin Carter as well has at the very least provided solid defense. But, you know, considering what he was expected to do, coming out of Providence, it hadn't really been to the, extent that the Kings were looking for. It was just not an optimal pick for them. And, you know, it's crazy because they got Devin Carter in the first round. So you instantly just lose the value deal here. You acknowledge that you did not hit on this selection and you just offload him off your roster like that for a pick that's worth less, technically, by nature. The Hawks declined Jonathan Kuminga's $24.3 million team option, making him a free agent. I do believe that they may try to work out a, deal with him that's a bit more team friendly. Because you're going to have to pay some of these other guys. Jalen Johnson eventually, your Dyson Daniels eventually. Like, this is why they do it, right? Like, you want to create more room for those guys to get paid. If Jonathan Kuminga was truly seeking more money, that'll be outlined, I'm sure. And if that were to be the case, he'd be gone. He'd be gone. I think the Hawks have done enough to add to their depth and their defense throughout the draft even, to live with moving on from Kuminga if he's not willing to play ball. Because, regardless of how he's performing on the court, like, those other guys will inevitably have to get their money down the line. And it's best to create as much room as possible for all of that, as soon as they possibly can. So from that standpoint, this is a smart option for them. Just trying to create that space to, retain the players that are the most important to your success. The Knicks also signed Landry Shamet to a 3-year, $24 million contract. to re-sign with the team. The Thunder picked up Lu Dort's $17.7 million team option. So he, unlike guys of Wiggins and Joe's caliber, is returning to this Thunder squad. It was crazy too. There were rumors surrounding him stating that, oh, hey, they might move on from him and potentially get another small forward at that position. That did not end up being true, and Dort stays and survives the trading block, I guess. The Spurs signed Julian Champagnie to a 3-year, $45 million contract to return to the team as well. You don't want the lasting image of him to be the series he had against the Knicks. It is hard to ignore it. I mean, he disappeared for entire halves. He failed to really settle into a rhythm. And he wasn't efficient from the field in that series. I mean, literally, by, all means, he deserves it for everything that he did in the regular season and everything that he has been through with this team after coming from literally the Washington Wizards, where he was destined to not succeed, even as, the 76ers, as you mentioned, who, again, he didn't really have all of the opportunities with at that time. But you get in San Antonio and you see this rise in production. It's hard to, ignore that. I understand. 37.5% three-point shooter overall, 38.1% with the Spurs in the regular season last year. All that is good, but come time for the series against the Knicks, and he just struggled to really leave his imprint positively on the game at all. I mean, one of the best three-point shooters on the team. Yes, sure, he made the most total threes, and he shot 40.5% from the three-point line. But again, it doesn't tell the full story when you consider how hot some of his starts were and how lackluster he was in the second half of a few of those games, as was the entire team as well. It's not just a him thing. But, that's just something to monitor even when you have him locked up for the next few years. Jazz signed Jusuf Nurkic to a 2-year, $22 million contract. The Pistons also, and it's just, there have been reports surrounding the fact that Walker Kessler apparently did not agree on a $140 million deal. So I don't know about that. I'm still of the belief that he is going to return to this team. And if not, by sheer miracle, Lakers pick up that phone to trust Jusuf Nurkic over that. Even if he somehow performed better in Will Hardy's system, I don't know about that, bro. I ain't gonna lie to you. I don't know about that decision. The Pistons signed Kevin Huerter to a 3-year, $27 million contract extension. His time with the Pistons was a bit, I think they are expecting him to take a step up next season because it didn't really offer as much as they wanted. It was a trade deadline deal. They were looking for, again, more shooting help alongside, Cade Cunningham in this Pistons team at the time. They were performing exceptionally well, but struggling to shoot. Kevin Huerter didn't necessarily help the cause, making the deadline deal itself rank towards the lower end. To shoot 29.4% for an already struggling team from that distance on the floor is just not a great look on Huerter, and it did not mix well at all. But if he can improve that, if he can get that back to his typical numbers, because he is still a pretty good three-point shooter, recapturing that is going to be vital for his career if he wants to continue to last with this team. But yeah. The Warriors signed Kristaps Porzingis to a 2-year, $40 million contract extension. Okay. The Spurs signed Harrison Barnes to a 1-year, $8 million contract as well to return to the team. Instantly in the post that Charania put out, they cited veteran leadership. Instantly. And it's, easy to see that. Like I said, that's an example right there of what could happen for the Hornets in that deal. It's another young team building through the draft, acquiring all this young talent, and, still trying to have guys like Bismack Biyombo, who they also re-signed, and Harrison Barnes still around, who may not get the same kind of playing time, but who will keep them afloat and on the right path in this league and off the court of play. So, while, that can be frowned upon at times, and while I guess they can, talk and joke about the OGs and the unks of the NBA at the same time, man, when it comes to keeping your favorite player in check, sometimes that is absolutely what is needed. And the Spurs continue to keep that on their books for at least another year. The Heat also signed Simone Fontecchio to a 1-year contract. And with him, Fontecchio had also been in some obscure spots. Man came all the way from fucking Utah. And now as a 31-year-old 5th-year player, technically speaking. Yeah, crazy. I know, right? Ultimate draft and stash. Craziness, man. I tell you, bro. Look, man. Fontecchio, at the very least, has offered you some quality shooting. His entire last season with Miami saw him shoot 37.5% from 3 on 4.7 attempts per game. So, that's a pretty consistent rate. And it does, add some more spacing off the bench now for this team trying to muster a championship out of all of this. That is the idea when you go out and you get Giannis Antetokounmpo after all. And you surround himself with another shooter who is fairly cheap. You also have someone off the bench who can come right in. And, in those minutes where you will need some of those shots to fall, he can get you a few. That is much better than we can say about Nikola Jovic. If the Heat are deciding to make all these moves for these wings over 30 now, it still helps to have some youth on that team. But Jovic, who also had a horrendous season from 3 in his own respect, just cannot really stay with this team much longer. I would have to imagine that they are trying to think up some way of getting him out of there. As we speak, honestly. As we speak. So, we'll see how that is. And, to move on from that as well, let's see. Anything else right now? Because, again, it's getting crazy. We are in that time for fucking free agency. We are truly in this. So you gotta respect it. Okay, as I'm seeing here, Robert Williams III has signed a 3-year, $44 million contract extension with the Trailblazers as well. So they're bringing him back. He was also listed as a backup, big man, behind Donovan Clingan. And I will admit that in that series against the Spurs as well, he did help to slow things down at some points. So his minutes have proven to be valuable in ways for this Blazers team. The same situation with him as it typically is, though, is just about being on the court consistently. making sure that his health is in order, especially at this time, so that when you're in the NBA season, you're going to get the most out of him. He legitimately is, for his value, one of the better defenders you could ask for. He just has to be on the court to be effective. It's as simple as that. And then Jock Landale signed a 1-year, $14 million deal with the Hawks. I don't know about $14 million worth, but I do think that, honestly, with what they are expecting Landale to do, and with them drafting Henri Veza out of North Carolina and Arizona, I am thinking that is a model from which they'll have him learn as a guy who can not only crash the boards, but as a guy who can space the floor, like Landale has surprisingly done with this Hawks team from time to time. So that is just, sometimes you will learn and you will gain that information from the most unlikely of places and people. It just so happens that Landale will fall in that conversation. So, man, crazy news between two of the more confusing trades I've ever seen. A lot of players opting into or declining options and team options and things of that nature. And then, honestly, whatever chaos is going on in this Malik Beasley situation, there's still a lot more to be had with this free agency period in general. And especially now with LeBron formally alerting the Lakers of his intentions for this season, it does create, admittedly, a large buzz now. Everybody is going to be on this shit for the next few days. I'm sure there's going to be something. Because everybody can't wait to see, literally, where this motherfucker is going to land. Like, genuinely, again, I'm gonna restate it for the record, stamp it right now. Whether or not it ends up happening, I do not want LeBron and Anthony Davis on the fucking Warriors. I don't want it. I don't. I might be one of the few, but I am stamping that shit over and over again. I don't want them on the team. I don't. Just establish that right now. In all seriousness, though, hell of a lot of coverage. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, as that will do it for this one. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.